Hello everyone, my name is Jessica Harding and I teach Chinese in Indiana to high schoolers, and I really wish I was out there in San Diego with you guys right now, but happy National Chinese Language Conference 2019. Hope you guys enjoy the video that I've made about the topic nega. Today I will be discussing nega, which is a Chinese filler like or also means that in Chinese. And it sounds very similar to an English racial slur that's referred to as the N-word. So I will be giving a little bit of information about that word for people who might not be familiar. And then I will also include some possible approaches for introducing the topic in your class. The N-word actually refers to two different words. The first one is pronounced nigger, and it is the original form of the word, and it was used to dehumanize Black people, and it was very common in the times of slavery and even after, just to show that Black people were less than other people. So this term is taboo for all people to say, even Black people. So I'm going to try my best not to use it for the rest of this video, just to be respectful. And then the second version of this word is nigga, and it is derived from the original form, but it's used differently. It's used mostly by Black people with other Black people, and some Black people even say that it has a positive meaning. Not all Black people agree with that though. And it's commonly heard in rap music, and even Black people will commonly use it with one another. It's taboo for anyone who isn't Black though to use this word, and even some Black people don't like it. So it's probably advisable for anybody just to avoid speaking both versions of this word. You don't want to be misunderstood, and you don't want people to think that you feel Black people are less than human. So that's my advice there. It's also really important to consider the impact of the N-word. From a very young age, American children are taught that the N-word is dehumanizing and hurtful, and that if they use that word, they are racist. So the word carries a lot of weight here. And so it's important to consider how hearing nega might sound to our Chinese learners, especially if they're American or Canadian and have had this ingrained in them their whole lives. It's also important to emphasize context. Lots of Black Americans, including myself, when they first go to China, they find the term nega to be very jarring because they're hearing it in their context back home. So I was very lucky that I was warned about this. And so when I heard it in China, and I didn't know any Chinese at the time, I wasn't alarmed. I was surprised, but never alarmed. And then I slowly got more used to it. I knew it didn't mean what it meant back home. And now, because I lived in northern China, and because I have know a lot of people from northern China, I use it myself, and I don't even notice it when people use it in Chinese. So context is really important, and it changes. Now I want to highlight some approaches for teachers. These are things that I've used in the past. Feel free to use them, tweak them, or develop your own, whichever you feel is the most appropriate for you. If you're teaching young students, they might not immediately connect nega with the N-word, so you might not need to bring it up in class. It might be best if you don't, because you'd want to avoid a situation in which parents accuse you of teaching their children racial slurs and hurtful language. If students do ask though, you can talk about it by bringing up a word that has two different meanings in different languages. I've in the past used the word taco, which in Spanish means Mexican dish, and in Japanese means octopus. So if a person spoke both Spanish and Japanese, and they said taco in Spanish, they would mean something very different than if they said taco in Japanese, because they're different languages, and we understand that different languages have different meanings. For older students, I think it's important to bring up the topic on your own. A lot of them have probably had some experiences with racial slurs so far and are thinking more about their identity and differences between people, so it is more appropriate to bring it up with them. And of course, you again should explain the use of nega and what it means in Mandarin. And then I think you can even have an activity where you ask students to consider what it would be like if were an offensive slur in another language. And that can be an interesting way to have them discuss context, and older students should be better able to handle that type of conversation. Something else that's important to keep in mind is that students should be expected to hear nega, but they shouldn't be forced to use it themselves as a filler. One is because it's not a universal filler in Chinese, right? In different regions of China, there's varying amount of usage of that filler. And two, even though students know the context, it still might be very uncomfortable for them to use a word in the US with lots of Americans that sounds like a word they've been told not to use. And then three, if the students are in an immersive environment, they're probably not going to readily pick up a filler from another language. They're probably still going to use the English fillers. And lastly, we want to outline appropriate use for the classroom. Students really shouldn't be using nega outside of using it as a verbal filler or saying that one. If they're using it in a different context in the classroom, it should be interpreted as a slur or an insult. You don't want the kids to get sneaky with being mean to one another, so you just want to keep that in mind too. So some final thoughts. If you are nervous about introducing this topic in your class, or you do it and it doesn't go so well, feel free to reach out to a diversity coordinator or a director on your campus if you have one, or if you don't, reach out to your colleagues and just talk with them, because this is not easy. And I think it helps to show our kids that sometimes we have to grapple with difficult things when we're learning language and ambiguity, and the same is true when we're learning about different cultures. So it's really worth it in the end to go through some difficulty to better understand something that you didn't know about before. So I wish you guys all the best of luck with this topic and just with teaching Chinese in general. So happy National Chinese Language Conference again, and thanks so much.